This is a HeadGum podcast.
This week's episode of the Jeff Rubin Show is brought to you by Beau Brummel. Beau Brummel makes skincare products for men, and I'm talking lotions and soaps that don't overpower you with some weird smell, and Beau Brummel products are made right here in New York, just like the Jeff Rubin Show. One key difference between Beau Brummel products and the Jeff Rubin Show is that they make high-quality skincare products that use charcoal to draw dirt out of your skin, whereas this podcast, it's just more of a general interview program. It really doesn't do anything like that. Beau Brummel was a real person who invented the look of wearing a suit and necktie. Ever wonder who did that? It was Beau Brummel. And now, BeauBrummelForMen.com is embracing and continuing his legacy. Listeners of this podcast can save an additional 15% when they shop there by using the promo code Jeff15. That is Beau Brummel for men, B-E-A-U as in Beau Bridges, not Bo Burnham, B-R-U-M-M-E-L-L. I don't know any other famous Brummels that I can compare that to. BeauBrummelForMen.com, promo code Jeff15, and here's the show. Hey everybody, welcome to the Jeff Rubin Show. I am Jeff Rubin here with Matt Oldweiler, who runs what is, as far as I can tell, the best Garbage Pail Kids website on the internet. Welcome to the show, Matt. And the name of that website is gpk.net, is that right? .com, excuse me. I don't know why I assumed you didn't get the .com. So that's GEEPEEKAY.com, gpk.com, garbagepailkids.com. And I guess probably I think if you're unfamiliar with Garbage Pail Kids, this is going to be one of those podcasts where I recommend you actually pause for a moment, take out your phone or whatever, and maybe do a quick Google image search or otherwise just try to look at some Garbage Pail Kids just to have some idea what we're talking about here, because they're pretty visually striking. And the reason I want to talk about them on the show is I was kind of too young to collect them. I was a little too young for Garbage Pail Kids, I would say. But I definitely saw them, and I was very aware of them, and they made an impression on me. But I would say I never really understood what the deal with Garbage Pail Kids is. And that's what we're here to figure out today. So, Matt, let's get the ball rolling here. How do you describe Garbage Pail Kids?
Well, first, I feel old now because I was collecting them when they came out.
I was just a shade too young. Like, I probably could have, maybe, but, like, I don't know.
Sure.
I just didn't. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
so when was that? I guess, when were they out? Let's frame this.
Sure. They just actually celebrated their 30-year anniversary last year. So they came out in 1985, and Topps, who everybody is familiar with for their baseball cards and sports cards, they also do a number of non-sport card releases. So they did like a Mars Attacks card set, and they do Star Wars, and they do a number of non-sports cards. And back in 85, this is when Cabbage Patch Kids were the craze. Like, people were, fighting in stores to get them, and
sure, and
everybody had to have one.
And Cabbage Patch Kids, which I was young enough to have, that was like you alluded to, like a toy phenomenon, kind of like Furbies maybe, or a Tickle Me Elmo type thing.
Yes,
but they were just dolls, right? They're dolls. But what actually, sub question, I guess. What was it about Cabbage Patch dolls? Because I had one, and I was vaguely aware that they were a phenomenon too. But like, I think in retrospect, like, it's kind of unclear why. Like, what was it about them?
I don't know. I mean, I had a couple myself, and I remember getting sucked into the craze and having to get one. And I mean, I didn't have any other dolls. I don't have a problem with that, but it was weird that I had to have one of these. So I don't know, but those were so popular that Topps got together with a couple of their artists and decided to do a parody card set. And a lot of people say that the dolls were for the girls and the cards were for the boys. But like I just said, I had both. So
Yeah, I had a Cabbage Patch doll.
yeah,
I was
so the
very
cards
young,
were
but
they would take the Cabbage Patch Kids and put them in gross or scary situations, and the early Garbage Pail Kids were fantastic. I mean, they had ones that were drunk or cross-dressing. I mean, they really pushed the envelope pretty far, considering nothing like that had ever really been done before.
so these are trading cards that depict this toy of the moment, which is these Cabbage Patch dolls, which kind of have this like cherub-like face, like this like kind of dopey expression on them and very innocent eyes, and kind of taking that design. And on each trading card, you see a Cabbage Patch doll-like character, either a boy or a girl, and they're either facing imminent doom, or something gross has happened to them, or they're doing something gross, or they're already dead. Like they're like death and bodily functions are pretty heavy themes, right?
Yes.
Is there anything else I'm missing? Like sometimes it's just an inanimate object. It's just like just like, I don't know, Freddy Fridge, and it's just like a man shaped like a fridge. And it's like, all right, I guess I don't know, something would happen to that guy.
Yeah, they do a lot of parody ones. Like they'll draw them as a hamburger patty or an animal, but the ones that seem to resonate and last are the ones that were gross. And I mean, and they're aiming these towards, 10-year-old boys. That's kind of the target audience when they came out. So poop and snot jokes are a home run, and they price these at 25 cents a pack. So pretty much everybody could afford one, and they took off, and they were releasing at one point. I think they were releasing up to 5 series in 1 year. So I mean, they just kept coming out and out. So it was pretty crazy.
So you would buy like a pack of trading cards. Each card, am I remembering this correctly? Each card is also a sticker.
Yes, they were stickers.
So you
and
could
there was
deface
actually
something with this disgusting imagery.
Exactly.
I say disgusting very lovingly. I think Garbage Pail Kids are great. I don't mean to judge them. But yeah, like this is like some pretty upsetting imagery. And you'd buy like a pack of them, I guess, like, just like trading cards. And these, like you just alluded to this, they're so popular, just like, I guess, the original Cabbage Patch Kids, that they're putting them out. Like, how popular were Garbage Pail Kids? Because I was a kid, so I don't really have a frame of reference for just how big it was.
It was huge. I mean, these were literally, they could not be kept in the stores. They were selling out. They were getting a lot of press, which was something that didn't often happen to a trading card set. They would be on the nightly news. They were banned in schools, partly or mostly, I believe, for the images that some parents felt were inappropriate, but also the distraction that they brought with them. I remember they were banned in my school. The teachers would take them away, which...
That's how you know it's
awful,
a good toy.
But it added it added a little rebel factor, and just to rewind a half a second to the artwork, it is gross, but it is very well done. Like the artwork for it is beautiful. Like these are little paintings that were done for these trading cards. That there are other card sets that come out and they're kind of scribbled very cartoony. These were purposefully drawn and painted to be little pieces of art, and they're great. And I think that's a large reason why the images have kind of held up and become these iconic pop culture images.
Yeah, something I learned reading about Garbage Pail Kids to prepare for this conversation is that, and I did not know this, that Art Spiegelman was maybe one of the first, if not the creator of it. Is that right, as an artist?
He was the art director for Topps back in
so he's the art director for
late 1984 when this started to bubble up.
Art Spiegelman is like one of the great cartoonists, comic artists of all time. His probably most well-known work is Mouse.
Correct.
But he's also just one of those like captains of cartooning, just like one of those luminaries of who everyone looks up to, who does a lot of work, I think, about like cartooning literacy, and it just like has done a lot for cartooning and graphic novels to make people take those seriously. So
Yeah, he's a huge name. Yeah, he's very well respected.
So what's his involvement? He was the artistic director at Topps. What does that mean outside of the context of Garbage Pail Kids, and then what does that mean once Garbage Pail Kids gets going?
Well, and everything I'm going to say is, stuff I've kind of learned over the years. Obviously, I wasn't there, but back when this was first becoming an idea, there were basically four figures that were heavily involved. There was Mark Newgarden and Art Spiegelman, who were both art directors at Topps. And then there were John Pound and Tom Bunk were the two artists that were heavily involved in the early cards. And they got together and they would submit concepts, and the art director would weigh heavily on what got approved and what didn't get approved. But they would also, all four of them, and others as well, would brainstorm the names or come up with a different card they'd like to see, kind of shape what they thought the series should look like. And based off what I've read, it was a very collaborative effort early on, where they all just started to really get involved in this and get excited about where it was headed. And then it just took off, and it was overwhelming. I mean, they were doing a painting a day, the artists were, and it was really a team effort made up of a team that were all highly talented and have gone on to be super respected in their fields.
I don't know those other names as well as I knew the name Art Spiegelman. Who are those other people, and what did they go on to do?
John Pound, he created the majority of the original series Garbage Pail Kids back in the 80s. He painted a majority of them. And interestingly enough, he does like software development, artistic software for kids. And he's done a pretty fantastic job of staying out of the limelight. Tom Bunk is a well-known artist who's done a number of huge projects. Most people know him from Mad Magazine. He did a lot of the super busy cartoon character drawings in Mad Magazine, and does a lot of little side projects there and there. Mark Newgarden, I believe, still works with Topps. I'm not sure about that, but I believe he still works there.
Did Topps do other card sets that were, I guess, primarily artistic as opposed to, baseball cards or something like that? That Art Spiegelman and these other people were all working on? Was there other art to be art directed at Topps before Garbage Pail Kids?
Yeah, they had a pretty extensive non-sport line. None of them really took off the way this one ended up doing. But for the longest time, I'm not a collector of wacky packages, but those go back way before Garbage Pail Kids. They would depict popular item you can find in a store, and they would just tweak the name to make it gross or funny. And those are still being released today. So Topps did that. I mentioned earlier Mars Attacks, which is kind of a comic card line based off the Mars Attacks franchise. So
right.
they do some here and there.
And the Mars, I of course remember the Mars Attacks movie, and I was aware of the cards when the movie came out, but those cards are pretty similar in that they're trading cards that depict, they're not quite as gross. I gotta come up with a better word than gross, but they do depict a lot of death and chaos and misery, right? Like each card's sort of like a horrific scene of the Martians taking over Earth.
Yes, that's right. And I somehow I never got into that craze, but those are super popular. I mean, they're still doing card sets for that. So Topps has found a way to kind of get their finger on the pulse of what's hot, and they do a pretty good job of running with it. They obviously have some misses here and there, but yeah, there is some other non-sports cards. I just seem to fall into Garbage Pail Kids and put all my focus there. So.
You said that they would. It's just funny to think about what that submitting concepts phase would look like. Do you have any what is the pitch? And I know you're not there, but just what is the pitch for a Garbage Pail Kid? Is it just it's a girl, but she's melting? It's like,
yeah,
she has snot coming out of her armpits.
Well, I think it got early on. It was obviously easier. Nothing had been done, so they would just come up with. A girl in a guillotine. Oh, great. And, and then they would go on and they'd get to as the series progressed, they started to get a little more abstract. Like you mentioned, the refrigerator one, or, they'd have, just ones that weren't necessarily a gag. They were just kind of a parody of something. And then, as everything tends to do, they eventually kind of sales started dwindling, and the concepts got a little bit weaker. But in terms of submitting the concepts, the artist will sketch up a pencil sketch and maybe even like scribble a name idea on it, and then just send them to Topps, and Topps will go through them, decide what one they think has potential, and then the artist will do a color rough to see how it looks in color, and then eventually a final painting. And based on my conversations with artists over the years, they submit a ton of concepts. They'll just scribble something out and send them all in. Topps will reject them or accept them, and then maybe years later they'll accept one they'd already rejected. So it's a back and forth process, kind of a brainstorming between the artists and the art directors.
What else have you learned from talking to the artists over the years? I'm interviewing you about your interviews with them. We're getting a secondhand interview for a moment.
Yes, going deep. So it's important to note, and I assume most people listening don't really have a history with Garbage Pail Kids, maybe a casual one. They bought a couple packs here and there, but they were released in the 80s, like 85 through 88, and then they disappeared until 2003 when Topps kind of caught wind of the whole pop culture revival. 80s were huge. So they started releasing them again. And a new series just released last week. So they're still in stores. And over those years, like the original artists that worked in the 80s really aren't involved in the newer series. There's a bunch of new artists. And so I don't have a whole lot of involvement with the old artists. Tom Bunk, I'm in contact with from time to time. But the new artists are kind of like you and me. They're people that have a history with Garbage Pail Kids. They collected them, and now they're drawing for them. So it's crazy. It's great. They have this wonderful attitude that they're doing something they love. They're working on a product that they love, that they loved as a kid. And thanks to the internet and social media, that they're very available to collectors, which is great. You can interact with them. You can see their paintings online, and so it's a nice little twist from something that was a popular collectible back in the 80s that's being reborn with kind of this new ideas and new life.
As a collector, as a connoisseur, do you see like a curve in the quality of Garbage Pail Kids? Was it initially amazing and then it tapered off and now it's decent again? Like what's the quality been like over the years? Has it been up and down?
Yeah, that's a great question. And each artist has their own, well, obviously they have their own style. So when they're drawing a Garbage Pail Kid, regardless of the model sheets that they're given of this is how it's supposed to look, their style will bleed into it. Back in the 80s, that didn't seem to have as big of an effect. They all kind of would come together and form a consistent looking set. The newer artists, the sets do look a little different. And to be clear, I'm not saying one artist is better than the other or this or that. But the consistency is not the same as it was back in the 80s. The quality, I'm going to leave that up to the individual eye, but the sets are certainly not as focused, and they don't have the same look from card to card to card as they did back in the old ones.
You know, we keep coming back to the 80s, and Garbage Pail Kids was in the 80s, and there's this nostalgia for the 80s. Does Garbage Pail Kids kind of reflect the era it was born in, the 80s? Because, you know, looking through them just over the past day or two, I see, like, some Reagan. Of course, probably the most single famous Garbage Pail Kid is the one that's on the cover where the kid's, like, blowing up his own head, and there's, like, a nuclear explosion, and, like, you know, that was nukes. That was a thing in the 80s. I mean, they still exist now, but it was like sort of a day-to-day concern. Is there a lot of that in Garbage Pail Kids? Is there a lot of like, not that it just happened to come out in the 80s, but a lot of it that almost it only could have happened in the 80s?
Yeah, it's strange. Like I don't looking at the cards now, I realize that back in the 80s, I didn't get a lot of them. Like,
which ones do you see now that you didn't get when you were a kid?
but the one that always comes to mind is the cross dresser. Like there's one. It's just a guy standing in front of a mirror, and he's wearing like fishnet stockings and makeup, and I just thought it was a funny card. Like I didn't view it as any like, I don't know. It wasn't saying anything deeper than just something funny, and there was a lot of those that they just went over my head, or I didn't really care to look deeper. I just thought they were funny and cool images, and nowadays, like Topps has done a pretty fantastic job of bringing this series or this franchise back to life. Nobody cares about Cabbage Patch Kids anymore, so the card sales weren't that great. They started releasing a bunch of inserts with their sets, and that really wasn't working. So now, the last year, they've really kind of refocused their product and tried to aim it at stuff that's going on in today's media. So obviously, nuclear bombs, they're still, relevant, like you said, but that image is old. So now they're going and they're having a field day lately with the 2016 election. So they're creating cards based off of Donald Trump, of Hillary Clinton, of the campaign, and they're releasing them online the day after the debates or after events, or I'm sure there'll be one out tomorrow or a couple out tomorrow after the most recent debate.
Yeah, we're recording this the day of the second debate. As the candidates prepare, this is what we're doing. This is what we're talking
important
about.
Issues here. So they've done a good job. I mean, they're getting mentioned in newspapers again and on popular websites for tackling something that's current, and that doesn't sit well with a lot of the nostalgia-driven diehard collectors because they want just the simple images on a little card. They don't care about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton coming into their hobby. But it's working for Topps. They're getting a bunch of new people buying the cards, and so got to make money, I guess.
When you talk about the Garbage Pail Kid who was a cross-dresser, it makes me think probably a lot of Garbage Pail Kids cards in the original set that they couldn't get away with today, which is interesting because, like, in a lot of ways, there's more you can get away with more than you can. You can get away with more today than you ever could before. Yet I have to assume there's some Garbage Pail Kids that just like could not exist today. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a couple articles that have been written over the years about you couldn't do this now and.
Wait, are those about the Garbage Pail Kids? I'm not saying Garbage Pail Kids in general. I guess they do exist, but are there specific Garbage Pail Kids that are like just with our current perspective we now recognize as way too far? Because they're pretty edgy.
Yes,
like they
yes.
are. There's. I assume there is because they're pretty edgy. Like, what are those?
Yes, there's ones that depict kids being hung in a noose. Topps did a pretty good job of removing like any kind of guns or anything from their cards, and they would actually go so far as to reject concepts. So some would make it as far as being painted and submitted as a final card, and then Topps would reject them. So there was ones where like a kid had his tongue sticking out and the tongue was holding a gun facing him, shooting himself in the head, which is pretty messed up.
Yeah, but that's like legit, like edgy. Like you have got my attention, Garbage Pail Kids. That's pushing it.
Yeah, the artist when they're drawing it is like, not sure this one's going to get through, but. So nowadays, and they still to this day, they try to eliminate blood or anything that's physical violence.
Yeah, they're not gory. They're not gory.
No, they really go for the gross factor. But there has been a couple that have slipped through that have a little bit of blood here and there. They usually try to, make it a little more abstract. But so yeah, I mean, there's a few here and there that are a little bit over the top, but largely they tended to just make it over the top in terms of gross, like showing a lot of puke or stuff that your mom wouldn't like, that kind of stuff. Corpses, zombies, that kind of stuff.
Talking to you, I'm now realizing maybe one of the reasons I was interested in Garbage Pail Kids, even though I didn't collect them as a kid, is because it sort of hits on one of my favorite things, which is a pre-internet viral phenomenon. Something that just got passed around before you could just do that from your phone and everything. So that resonates with you. You see that, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And then I guess, why do you have any sense of how that started or why it got passed around? Do you think it's just can you believe they're doing this, plus maybe the quality of the art?
I think what really started tipping the scales and turning it into this craze was the disapproval from parents.
Right. So let's talk
you really
about that
felt
for
like
a
you
second.
were. Yeah, you felt like you were getting away with something. I mean, I had them. My mom hated them, but she would still, buy me some because she knew how important they were. But when they're getting taken away at school, and when you have to kind of sneak around, but you're not really doing anything. You're not stealing. You're not doing anything wrong, but it's still kind of bad. So it's kind of this free pass, and I think that really. It just had this effect of you're getting away with something, and it just added to the intrigue. And then when the images were cool, I mean, it just was like a little cherry on top. It made it even better. And then other brands would just jump on this train. So you could have toys to collect and, other items like jewelry sets and sunglasses and pencil bags. And so it just added to the intrigue and just made it so you could just indulge and overdo it. And it was great. I've never thought of it as a viral campaign until you said that, but it really was. I mean, it just took off with word of mouth around your neighborhood and around your classroom, and it's fascinating.
There's also an element to it, which again, I always feel I feel myself being 100 years old when I talk this way. But if you think about before the internet, now with Garbage Pail Kids, you could just at an instant tell which are the available cards. But then to see what Gooey Louie or whatever, you had to know someone that had the card to see the card itself. There was. You had to collect them just to even have access to what the images were, which is something that just isn't how it works today.
No, it's I still remember you would go to your friend's house and you'd see one you'd never seen before. And that just doesn't happen nowadays. And they had checklists on the back of the card that you would actually put a checkbox, scribble in a checkbox instead of having an app where you update your collection or, whatever you do nowadays. So it's just so different and so foreign. And I have 3 kids now that, teenagers down to 9 years old, and they could care less. I tried to push this onto them, but they just don't enjoy it. And it just shows how different things are nowadays. This was all we did back in the 80s was trade these silly cards, and there's just so much more out there today. And
well, let me ask you: is there something that your kids are into that makes you feel like your mom with Garbage Pail Kids, where you think it sounds like your mom got you Garbage Pail Kids, so she abided them at least a little bit, but something where you kind of wish they weren't into it and maybe question the value of it, and if it's just wrong for them to be consuming it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific example. I know over the years I've kind of groaned we're spending our money on this, but there's been nothing that they do that I don't approve of, which is good. But I can't think of anything specific that I would prevent them from purchasing. They just have different interests, sports cards, that kind of stuff.
Ugh, gross.
I know.
Were you into sports cards or any other collectible cards?
I collected baseball cards for quite a while after Garbage Pail Kids kind of died away through high school and stuff. I collected baseball cards, and by nature, I'm not a hoarder, but I tend to collect things obsessively and kind of go head first into getting as much of one specific thing that I can get and then moving on. Garbage Pail Kids has been the only thing that I really have kept up an interest in. Other things will kind of come in and out, but
why is that? Why do you think that is? Why do you think Garbage Pail Kids has held your interest throughout the years?
I don't want to like bore your listeners, but
no, absolutely not. We are all along for this ride, and I want to hear why you're into Garbage Pail Kids.
Well, so it's hard to describe the 80s to somebody who didn't grow up in the 80s, but everything is so vivid for me from that time period. Like my brother and I just lived with my mom, but we lived in our same house the whole time. I had my same neighbors. I had the big wheels, the goofy hats, the big glasses, just everything that you see now in these like remakes of the 80s, like Stranger Things that came out on Netflix. Like that's how I looked. And I have this, I don't know, draw to it. I loved that time of my life. It wasn't great. Like I said, I mean, my parents were divorced and, so everything wasn't rosy, but I just loved being a kid in the 80s. And so when I look at these, and when I look at the old ones, not the new ones, but when I look at the old ones, it's this little time machine that like warps me back. The images are so vivid. I remember, when I saw this card, I remember I was on this neighbor's lawn, and at this time of year, they're just so strong emotions that get brought up when I look at them. And I really don't have that feeling with anything else in terms of what I collected. And then at the end of the day, they're just like a little escape. And that's what my website is. I'm an engineer at a telecommunications company. It's not exciting and I don't get to be creative. So this is like a little escape. When I have a free moment or two, I'll kind of work on my website, and it's just kind of kept it familiar in my mind over all these years and a nice little way to kind of do something doofy. I mean, I don't tell all my friends I run a Garbage Pail Kids website. I keep it a little secret, but
really?
Yeah.
Wow. Are they going to find out after, because they're all Jeff Rubin Show listeners?
Of course they are. So yeah, it's weird. I don't advertise it. I don't put it on my personal Facebook page or anything. It's just a little thing that my lovely wife is very patient with, and a few people know from here and there. But no, it's pretty much a little side hustle.
It's a project.
Exactly.
What I'm wondering, when you talk about remembering Garbage Pail Kids, do you have like an earliest memory with Garbage Pail Kids? Do you remember who your first Garbage Pail Kids were, the cards you had?
I remember, yes. I wasn't lucky enough to get the first series when it came out. I started collecting in the second series when it came out a couple months after, but I remember the first one I ever saw, and I remember, I won't say the last name, but I was sitting in Corrine's yard, which was my neighbor up the street.
Shout out to Corrine.
Yeah, hello. And then one of our other neighbors came by and had this card, just one card. It was Dead Ted, and it was this little like rotting corpse skeleton kid coming out of the grave, big moon in the background, a headstone, and it was purple, and I just was blown away. Like it wasn't like I was looking for a card or anything to collect. He just had it there, and I was just hooked. I mean, it brought out the worst in me. I started like jonesing for these things, and yeah, it was crazy. But yeah, I remember the first one I saw, and yeah, I don't remember that about the first baseball card I saw or anything like that. So
that was Dead Ted. I would really encourage people to look up these cards as we're talking about them. And, we kind of talked a little bit at the very beginning about the controversy and the news and how more recently about how parents would accept it or whatever. And I guess just what was going on there? Because I think it's funny to think of, like, there's been a lot of trading card controversies since then. Like, Magic the Gathering had a whole thing. Pokemon has been banned at a lot of schools. I'm sure there's, like, newer, cooler ones I don't know about that have also been banned from schools. But maybe I don't know. You tell me. Was Garbage Pail Kids like the first trading card controversy? And how controversial was it exactly?
It was pretty controversial. I think, well, I think it was probably the first one, or at least the one that really set the bar for pushing the limits with parents and with schools. I mean, I have on my site, I have just dozens and dozens of scans of newspapers from back in the 80s, these people writing into, Dear Abby and their local paper demanding that these cards get removed from their cities. And they were on like Nightline News, and Ted Koppel would be doing a report about, on one hand, how stores can't keep them in stock, but then in the same breath, the disapproval that they're getting from parents and from, authorities. And so I really think they're the first one that not only got the attention, but also embraced it and just kept pumping out releases and making them gross and not shying away from the attention. And it should be noted at some point in the discussion that they ended up getting sued by Xavier Roberts. I think I have his name right. The guy who made Cabbage Patch Kids. He ended up taking Topps to court and winning a lawsuit. So Topps eventually had to, at first they were told that they had to stop making them totally. And then they got away with changing the image a little bit. So they would change the kids to make them look more like physical dolls. They'd have like joints or cracks. And then they had to get rid of the arched banner that was on their original cards and put a straight banner so it didn't look just like the Cabbage Patch Kids. But they didn't shy away. I mean, they were out there. They were getting sued. They were getting banned, and they just kept going. It was crazy.
Did they ever concede anything? Because I think of Magic cards, and Magic cards, I remember, they did get rid of Unholy Power. I think they got rid of the pentagram, and like Demonic Hordes they got rid of, and like any cards with like demon imagery they got rid of, because that was Magic the Gathering was making people worship Satan, as we all remember from the 90s.
Yes.
But they actually did concede a few of those cards. Did Garbage Pail Kids ever do any of that? Were there ever any they pulled from circulation?
No, they didn't do that. But so when it was in '86, so it's just fresh on the heels of when they first came out, is when they were actually ordered to stop producing them, and the lawyers were able to go back and forth and come to an agreement. But they did like drastically change the look and feel of their cards. So if somebody is looking at the 80s releases, they did 15 series over the 4-year span. You'll notice a tick in how the kids look from like series 10 and up, in addition, or aside from the banner above each kid being shaped differently. The eyes look different. The bodies look different. They really did kind of drastically change the look, and it didn't really sit well. And I think that eventually is what kind of led to the tapering off in sales.
Do Garbage Pail Kids cards hold any collectible value today? Any significant collectible value, maybe?
Yeah, they do. Not at all what you'll read on these articles that come out every once in a while of top 20 toys from the 80s you should have held on to. They'll list them as like $10,000 or all this crazy stuff. But they do have value. I mean, we're talking hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. But yeah, they're a nice little collectible to keep around. Some of the more expensive stuff is the one-off items like the toys that were released in the 80s. Those will tend to fetch a little higher price. They're a little harder to find.
They weren't that popular.
Yes.
Is there
exactly.
is there like a Honus Wagner, or to keep going with the Magic thing, a Beta Black Lotus or an Alpha Black Lotus even of Garbage Pail Kids, which is to say like one card whose value is disproportionately more than all the others?
Sure. Yeah. So 10, 15 years ago, it was a different story. Now Topps will release like one of one cards. So obviously those are higher demand, harder to get. But back in the 80s, there was one card that there was a printing error, so it didn't have the number in the upper right, and so everyone knew it's semicolon is the name, and it doesn't have the number in the upper right, and that was like the craziest thing. The fact that they did enough of a print run, so a lot of them actually made it out into the public before they fixed it, and it was the coolest card to have. The interest has kind of dwindled down a little bit. I have it sitting on my desk here, looking at me right now, but. So that was the one, like, that.
Who's the Garbage Pail Kid on that card?
It's just a straight-on profile shot of a boy, and half of his head is a green mutant with a big horn sticking out, and then the other half is the cute little boy in his little red and white striped shirt.
I see. So kind of like a Two-Face thing going on.
Yes.
I noticed, revisiting Garbage Pail Kids over the past few days, that they all have two names. Is that right?
Yes.
That was very confusing to me. Let's talk about this. So each design, first of all, for those who are somehow still listening but unfamiliar with the actual Garbage Pail Kids, so along with the disgusting imagery, they kind of have a pun-ish or a wordplay-ish, at least, name. I don't know. I don't want to hit me with just any of them.
Well, the iconic image that you mentioned earlier, the nuclear one, his name is Atom Bomb, but it's ADAM instead of ATOM.
Does he have an alternate name?
Yeah, and so each card has an A and a B. So it'll be 1A, 1B, 8A, 8B, and so the alternate one of that one is Blasted Billy. So they would
same art,
give them
but one is labeled Atom Bomb, one is labeled Blasted Billy.
Yes, and that really, I think that also played a huge part into why these were so fun to collect, because you could get your name on them. I mean, the Matt Rat was the one that was the first one that I remember having of my name. There were others before that, but that was the first one I remember. And so it was fun. Like, you had a cool card that had your name on it. It was a neat little addition they did. Nowadays, it's not as fun because they're all named something Donald or something Hillary. So that attraction has certainly kind of dwindled away over the years, but that was a neat part of the early releases.
I wonder, do you know Garbage Pail Kids well enough to tell me if there was a Jeff?
I can tell you for sure. I have a little section here.
You're on the website. You're cheating.
Yeah, there's a lot of Jeffs. There's Junkie Jeff, I think, is the first one that was released back in the original series. So there were some good ones.
We kind of talked about a few times now about the merchandising. What are some of like the weirdest Garbage Pail Kids collectibles that are kind of out there, and what are the really valuable ones that you alluded to earlier?
That's actually I've had the cards for 20 years. Like, I don't buy the cards anymore. I have all my original ones, so that's what's kind of kept the interest alive for me in terms of purchasing stuff. Do
you have any unopened packs?
Yes,
just like
I actually have
still unopened
boxes. Yeah,
unopened boxes. Sure. So that's maybe one day on your deathbed, not to get Garbage Pail Kids grim here, but you can like just relive opening, because there is something like the smell of it, I bet, is still in there.
Yeah, and they come with gum. And
the gum is still in there?
Oh, yeah.
Do you think the gum is going to be good? Like,
the cards are probably ruined at this point, but the gum is gross. You can find videos of people like eating it on YouTube, and it's just this chalky mess. And
wait, did all Garbage Pail Kids always came with gum?
Yes, the first 15 series. Yeah, they were in wax packs, which they don't exist anymore, and they would have a stick of gum in it. And yeah, so for 25 cents, you got a piece of gum, 5 stickers, and yeah.
Do you remember back in the day? Did you like the gum? Was the gum good?
The gum was fantastic.
Fantastic. That's what I was looking for. It was good gum.
You could smell it through the pack. It was great.
All right, so back on the toys, you were saying that you have all the cards you need. You have unopened boxes still. So what toys are you looking for? Like, what's out there?
There was a company, I think they're still around, but it was called Imperial Toy Corporation, and they did an extensive run of Garbage Pail Kids merchandise where it just screams 80s. Like, they made tacky snappers, like the little plastic handle, and it had the little, like, kind of rubbery, sticky snake thing that would, like, you could smack a piece of paper across the room, and they had little sunglasses and pencil toppers, and so that's the stuff that I really try to find. It's pretty rare to find the full boxes of that stuff, and so that's my favorite stuff. They also had metal trash cans. You could get pencil cases, all the 80s stuff that doesn't exist anymore. You could find that on. You could find companies making Garbage Pail Kids versions of almost everything. And then they also did a movie, which we haven't even mentioned, but that was a total train wreck.
You better believe I'm getting to the movie. So the movie is something like I primarily know. I've never seen the movie. I watched the trailer just yesterday, but but the VHS box cover, and my friend Pat was actually recently talking about like the VHS box covers of your youth. Like there's some there's some movies that like I feel like I've seen, but what I actually did was I just always saw the VHS box cover at Blockbuster, and Garbage Pail Kids is one of them, where I never saw the movie. I guess I kind of need to know first how they make Garbage Pail Kids a movie. One, how are the kids portrayed? And two, just like what is the basic plot of the movie? Just what happens in the movie?
The box cover is better than the movie. Like it's the movie is,
which kind of makes sense for Garbage Pail Kids, right? Like that's what Garbage Pail Kids is. It's an awesome looking still image. Like it makes sense. It would make a great box.
Well, they had such high hopes. Like it was so huge. Like we've talked about. So obviously a movie was the next step. And I remember going to the movie and they even had like promotional material. I got these 4 like oversized cards at the theater, like when I bought my ticket, which was just crazy for looking back how awful it did. But the concept of the movie was like a trash can from space comes down and there's this boy who works in an old antique shop.
Wait, but the Garbage Pail Kids in the movie are extraterrestrial in nature? Is that what I'm to understand here?
Well, they never explain that. They show them coming down from space, but they never really address what they're doing, and they're huge. So they're people in costumes. So they're like 4 feet tall, and they have these massive heads that are not really animatronic. They don't really move. So when they talk, their lips kind of just maybe open and close a little bit. It's just awful.
And these are people in suits portraying
correct.
The kids. And
yes.
The thing about the Garbage Pail Kids is that there's a million of them. It's literally a collectible trading card set, and they all have 2 names. Maybe the Atom Bomb Kids, like if you're gonna pick one of them, but like beyond that, there's no like stars. So which kids are the Garbage Pail Kids in the movies based on real cards? And if so, which ones made the jump? And was there any logic to it? Were they the most popular ones?
No, it's pretty weird. Like they chose, I think there was 5 in the movie, but they're really weird ones. Like they did like the one that's really an odd pick is there's an alligator one. There was just the card is a kid with an alligator head and a tail. So that one made a pretty interesting puppet or whatever. There was Valerie Vomit, so she would just throw up all the time, but she never really even threw up in the movie. It was just a sound effect. And
yeah, if you got a character named Valerie Vomit, like she's got to be throwing up in your movie.
You got to own it, yeah.
If you introduce a gun in Act 1, you know.
And there was a kid who farted and a comic book nerd character. So. They certainly weren't the all-stars of the cards. They were never the ones that you were like, wanting to get for your collection. So I don't know how they arrived on choosing those. There was also a Greaser Greg one, I forgot, and he has this atrocious like New York accent, and you got to watch that trailer just to get a glimpse of how bad it is. It's the lowest rated movie on Rotten Tomatoes. I think it has a 0%. So.
Yeah, it is. I believe the Wikipedia page says it is often considered among the worst movies of all time, which seems pretty fair. Is there anyone famous in it at least? Is there like one one classic actor from the 70s slumming it or something?
No, there's not. There's not even that.
Too bad.
I mean, yeah, I couldn't even do that. So.
Well, something else I learned yesterday, which I did not know, is that there was a Garbage Pail Kids cartoon, and potentially the reason I didn't know it is another thing I learned yesterday, is that it never aired in America.
Yes, it made it all the way to, like, from production. They had all the proposals, and they actually drew the cartoon, and then, man, I want to say it was right before it was scheduled to air, CBS did a number of complaints, ended up just pulling the plug on the whole show, and now you can buy it. They released it a few years ago, but
and this is weird because, I mean, Garbage Pail Kids are for kids, right? Like, what do you think the target age for Garbage Pail Kids is?
Definitely in the 80s, it was 8 to 12-year-olds.
But this cartoon, and it's controversial for 8 to 12-year-olds, but this cartoon is even younger kids. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon.
It is. It's got the slapstick intros and the kind of low quality, cell animation kind of stuff. So,
but I gotta admit, they do. The kids do look pretty disgusting. There's one that's melting, and it is one of the grosser the character designs I've seen in a Saturday morning cartoon. And there's another one whose limbs are all mixed up. Like he's got his arm coming out of his neck, his foot coming out of his arm. He's holding his head and it's not like there's nothing gross about it, but I gotta say it's a little unsettling. Like it definitely made me a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, it definitely is a little odd, and
but I guess that's admirable. Like I like that they were able to maintain some of the edginess, right? Like that seems like a really difficult balance to strike. Is like keeping any of that, any of what makes Garbage Pail Kids, when adapting it for an even younger set.
Well, and I think that's how they constantly got over the hump of like whether this is too far or not. Is all the Garbage Pail Kids are always smiling, like. Even if they're in pain or if they're being tortured, they always have this nice little grin on their face. And so it's not like if they're, the head's blowing up, they don't have this blood curdling scream face where they're scary looking. They're always just these cute little dolls that are in interesting situations.
I'd be remiss if we ended this without me going through some of your favorite cards. Like, I feel like we've talked about Garbage Pail Kids in the abstract. We've barely talked about specific cards.
Sure.
Do you have favorite cards?
I do. I have one. It's Joe Blow.
Is this your Skype icon?
That's actually a new version that one of the new artists did.
That's pretty good, your Skype. But okay, I want to go back to that one, but let's talk about your favorite one. Joe Blow what's Joe Blow about?
It's just a kid standing there with his arms out. It's Bazooka Joe on his shirt, and he's just popping a bubble. I mean, there's nothing gross about it, but it's just got this plain yellow background. It's very simplistic. But to me, it's exactly what a Garbage Pail Kid should look like. It's perfectly drawn. It's a simple gag. It's not gross. I don't like the fart jokes and the poop jokes that never really.
Wait a minute, you like Garbage Pail Kids this much, and you don't like the fart jokes and the poop
jokes? I know,
jokes?
it's weird. Those are always the ones I kind of flipped past and went for more of the simple ones.
But wait, what's the gag with Joe Blow? He's chewing gum, and what happens?
It's just pops. He's just got a blown bubble on his face and a little eye patch. There's really no gag other than he's just Bazooka Joe as a Garbage Pail Kid, and it's very simple, and so I love that one, and that's the one I've always kind of just kept around. It's sitting here right next to my microphone, and I just love it. And the new one, my Skype icon, is one of the newer artists, Brent Engstrom, who's just fantastic. He combined Joe Blow with Atom Bomb, so it's
I see.
Instead of the mushroom cloud, it's a bubble coming out. And
let me see if I can describe what's happening here in this updated version of Joe Blow. Boy, you're really going to feel the limitations of a podcast right now. What is the name of this card so people can look it up?
I think it's actually, I don't even know. It's part of a series they did where they just, they redrew Atom Bomb in a number of different, so the one will have like milk coming out of his head or crickets coming out of his head, and this one just has a bubble, but I don't think it has a unique name.
In this one, there is a small, again, cherub-like boy, Dimples. He is the Joe Blow character, so he's got an eye patch, but he's also wearing a suit. So already this is like sort of a weird thing. But he is also blowing bubblegum bubbles out of his nose and both of his ears. And get ready for it. He is also blowing one enormous bubble outside of the top of his head, exploding the top of his head. So kind of like that iconic nuclear bomb one. There's a bubble that is exploding the top of his head. Inside that bubble is his brain hooked up to his spinal stem, and I'm not done yet. Hooked up to the brain is his missing eyeball that is covered by the eye patch. So there's chunks of head going everywhere, being exploded by this bubble. In the bubble, the brain and the eye connected to the brain. It is really pretty remarkable. It's pretty good, and I'm pleased to learn that this is one of the newer ones because I think it's really good. And if this is what the newer ones are like, they're doing it right. Yeah,
this came out in 2011. This one did. So
that's an interesting one. I love how, as a huge Garbage Pail Kids fan, you almost got your favorite is almost the anti-Garbage Pail Kid, like where nothing gross or disgusting is happening on it.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. It was the first one in the series. So when Series 3 came out, it was the first one. So you'd always see it in your collection if you had a stack of them. If you put them in numerical order, it would always be on top. So it was very familiar from that perspective. And then over the years, it just kind of, just looks perfect.
Do you have, in your mind, like an all-time grossest Garbage Pail Kid that like kind of gives you the willies even still?
There's one that I remember not really looking closely at when I was a kid, and it's gross. It's just a girl cooking on a stove, and she's got a little stock pot, and she's just barfing into it, and it's
what's that one called?
It's drawn so well that it's really gross. I don't like that one.
What's that one called?
I think it's Valerie Vomit. She was actually one of the ones that was used in the movie as well.
Oh, so she's famous. I want to look this up. Yeah, the Vomit is. I'm looking at the image of the card. The Vomit. Oh, and I'm looking at her in the movie. Those are terrible. Okay, the Vomit is like really chunky, and you can like kind of guess what she ate for lunch. But and she also has this like dazed look, like she's got like stars and wigglies all around her, and her eyes are kind of like cross-eyed, like she's literally cross-eyed. She's vomiting so hard, and you can kind of see within the vomit some spaghetti and tomatoes. Looks like she had some leafy greens, which is good. But through all of this, she's still stirring the pot. Like, even though she's almost fainting from her vomiting, she is still actively stirring her vomit into the pot. And last point on this one, she's vomiting enough that it's going to completely fill the pot. Like, that's disgusting. I love it. I'm really enjoying describing these cards. Or were there any that were the most, like, controversial? I guess you mentioned the kid hanging.
It's actually come out in recent years. They've actually re-released most of the ones that they banned, but there was a couple drawn for the early releases. One of them is Abe Lincoln, and he's holding like a playbill, and he has a bullet hole in his head. So they didn't release that one. They have gone on to release it now. There was one.
Can I quickly note that in the image search results for Valerie Vomit, there's fan art of the movie Valerie Vomit doing the pose of the original Valerie Vomit, which is really great work from some Garbage Pail Kid fan out there.
Someone took the time.
Yeah.
There's another one of a nuclear blast, and there's a brick wall.
Wait, what's it called? I want to look it up. I want to be.
Shoot. Let me see if I can find. I don't know the name of it. I'm not really good with the names nowadays, but it's just like a ghostly image of the kid on the brick wall. So the kid's gone, but the nuclear blast kind of left the image of the kid on the wall. So they did some pretty out there ones. They tended to do a pretty good job of not making a political statement, which has certainly changed nowadays. But there is like, it seems like looking at like the politics ones they've done recently, like I don't know if they've made a statement as much as like, what if all the candidates were gross-looking babies instead? Like, they're all like they seem to just turn everyone into something disgusting. Yeah, they're certainly not making a stance or anything like that. They're just the artists will watch the debate. So let's just use tonight as an example. So they'll watch the debate, and then they'll pay attention to, like, Donald Trump, for example, was sniffing a lot in the previous debate, so they actually made a gag out of that, or so they'll actually watch the debate, and then tonight, after the debate, they'll work all night. They'll submit a couple concepts, work back and forth with tops. They'll actually do the painting, like the physical painting with brush and ink, and submit it to tops, and it will be on sale on Topps' website tomorrow. So we're talking a 24-hour turnaround on these, which is unheard of. I mean, these artists are amazing that they can even churn that out. But the fact that that's where hobbies are now, like not just with GPK, but with everything. I mean, something can happen this night and you can have it on a site for sale tomorrow. It's crazy.
We've alluded to it a few times, but you made this website. I'm not surprised to learn that you're in it. You work with computers, because the website is really nice. Like, how would you describe the website? What can people learn about Garbage Pail Kids there?
So 10 years ago, it's crazy to think that 10 years ago it was hard to kind of see stuff online. I belonged to a couple forums, but it was harder to share stuff. So I created my site just to show my collection to the people in my forum. It was just kind of a neat thing to do, and I've always loved computers, so it was just an excuse to learn more. And then over the years, it got to be kind of popular, and it morphed from my collection more into a reference website. So I try to get as much on there as possible, while at the same time keeping the design up to date. So I taught myself all this stuff. I use it as a creative outlet. So it's a lot of trial and error. But it has a gallery section that includes images of every card ever released. You can scroll through them. It has information, printable checklists for each of those cards. Then it has a features section, which is like kind of high level stuff, like information about the movie or the history. You can read the entire lawsuit on my site. And then I have a merchandise section, which is devoted to the toys, the school items, the notebooks. Even nowadays, Funko, which is a massive toy company, they make Garbage Pail Kid vinyl toys. So the website's just on one hand, it's an excuse for me to learn something new and be creative, while at the same time helping out other people with their collections and learn more about something that's pretty obscure. One
more time, how can people find that website?
You go to gpk.com. It's GEEPEEKAY.com, and that's a play on the abbreviation of Garbage Pail Kids, GPK.
Well, Matt, I feel like I've got kind of a more solid grasp on Garbage Pail Kids. I feel like I got kind of an understanding of the phenomenon. Thanks so much for stopping by, breaking it down for me. Listen to me describe the cards.
No, this was great. No, thank you very much.
Thank you, as always, for listening to your Jeff Rubin Show. A big ol' thank you to my BFF, Adam, who suggested the topic for this week's episode. My friend Adam said you should do a Garbage Pail Kids episode, and god damn it, we did it. If you have someone or something you'd like to hear about on the Jeff Rubin Show, you can get in touch with me. Send me a message on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, where I'm Jeff Rubin Show. My email address is at jeffrubinshow.com, along with every episode of this show. I hope to see you there, but if not, I'll see you in 2 weeks with a brand new episode. But for now, bye!
That was a HeadGum podcast.